While Marcine's coming up here to bring up the next presentation, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. It's Cayton, Germany. Cayton, Germany is the operation manager for Crystal Clear Special Utility District. He has worked in the water industry for over 8 years and holds multiple water and wastewater licenses. Crystal Clear covers a large territory of a once rural area that is ever changing between about San Marcos and New Braunfels, Luling to Seguin. So with that, we'll have Cayton come up and talk about their participation and then some of the good stuff that they're doing down there on water loss.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Cayton, Germany. I'm the operations manager with Crystal Clear. And with that being said, we'll just dive right into it. A little backstory about Crystal Clear. We started in 1964. We were founded by a small group of farmers, basically just trying to acquire water to their crops and livestock. We are located in 4 different counties, Guadalupe, Hayes, Comal, and Caldwell. Fully staffed from top to bottom there, we're 28 employees. We cover 160 square miles of CCN, roughly 368 miles of pipeline and infrastructure in the ground. And currently we're serving about 5,500 connections. From the board of directors, we were requested to look at ways to mitigate and actively manage water loss within our district. One of the things that was said earlier is when we can start looking at water loss as a source instead of simply just water loss, that's very important. Again, the main request was to reduce water loss percentage and the number of leaks repaired in a year's time. So some of that production data right here is through May 2020 through August 2021. Some of the key numbers that I wanted to point out here was highlighted in red, May 2020 through May 2021. Over there on the right-hand side of that column, we're showing 23% annual loss. And in 2021, we've gotten that number down roughly about 2% to 21%. So a 2% reduction in water loss in 1 year's time is substantial in terms of gallons. The data collection, it's a group effort. We had to bring in some of our engineers, take a good look at utility billing data and see how accurate some of that stuff is. Field staff, of course, doing their daily checks and things like that to gather that data in order for us to input that into their system. Online data collection, such as SCADA systems, pulling a lot of that data from there, pumping totals and things in a 24 and 48-hour period, and being able to kind of cross-reference and compare those numbers that we're presenting in this audit. Another thing there on that last slide was multiple data sets. So there is a lot of back and forth through this validation. You present data and they review it, and it changes hands and goes back and forth so that we can kind of critique and tweak those numbers a little bit to where we are getting rated accurately at the end of the day. One of the charts and tables that they submitted in this water loss audit is different types of leaks, how long it was running on an estimated average for the year, and then the average gallon a minute rate that leak was occurring at. So mains, roughly we fixed 569 main leaks, 128 services, and 14 others. The others would be things like meters and washer leaks, things like that. Some of them that aren't as substantial. We have here the estimated runtime is about 9 days for main lines, 8 days for services, and 8.4 for others. And then the average flow rates was 7 for mainline breaks and 3 gallons a minute for services. The key number right here is that 56.1 million gallons per year in total loss. So if we were able to recoup some of that loss and put that back into our system, that's a good portion of water that we would be able to redistribute. Another table here that I personally found really interesting, simple ways to kind of mitigate some of this loss and correct that and get some of those recovered losses back by changing just the way that the system operates on a day-to-day basis. This here, a reduction in pressure of 1 PSI produces a real loss cost savings of 3.6 million gallons per year, which equates to about $12,000 a year in savings. So if you go down that chart a little bit, decreasing the average system pressure by 1 PSI and 2 PSI all the way to 10 PSI, those are substantial savings, adding up to $121,000 a year that could potentially be recovered and placed back into a budget or not have that system loss as a whole. So 10 PSI at a customer's residence is not something substantial. The difference between 60 and 70 is it's not huge. Not to say that you have to go to that extreme, but a couple pounds here or there, if you're able to mitigate at a customer's residence, and it equates to, say, $60,000 or $120,000, some of these numbers listed here on this table, it definitely adds up. Looking towards the future, we've currently cut our response time down to about 3 days. So we got time for locates to come in. If you remember, that average was about 8 days on repair times. So we've cut that in more than half. Meter accuracy, we just went through and did a whole system-wide change out of our meters at residence. Unauthorized use, we're catching 2-on-1s, direct taps. Billing and record keeping, we're keeping up on all that data day in and day out so that when we do these validation studies, it's accurate from the get-go. Leak detection crew on staff, that's something that we're looking towards in the future. Having a designated 2 or 3 man crew to actively go out and get on valves and hydrants and trace those main lines and find those leaks faster. Another thing is rehabilitation and replacement of pipelines, CIPs. The fact is, a lot of the times it's hard to fund those CIPs, $2 million in funding to replace a stretch of 6-inch line or 12-inch line, whatever the case is. It all boils down to money and having the funds to do that. But one thing that we can do is when we're there making these main repairs, instead of cutting out smaller sections of pipe, 2 and 3, 4, 5, 6 feet of pipe at a time, what we can do is stretch that out. So when we're able to replace 20 feet joints or 40 feet, or when we have the room to work, a few weeks ago, we had the guys replacing 500 feet of line in a day. It was a problem area and we were able to tackle it, and we got 2 crews on the site and we replaced that stretch where we were typically going back week after week after week repairing leaks in that same stretch of line. So tackling it from that perspective, I believe will definitely help us out. Again, we've already reduced water loss 2% in this last year. So I think if we continue to work these practices, it'll definitely help out. A little fun fact is we fixed 1,200 leaks last year. That it came out to roughly 86 leaks a month. That's a lot of leaks. We've since cut that down to 86 leaks in 3 months. We're just simply by replacing larger sections of pipe at a time when we are there spending the man hours to take care of that leak repair. So I do see it paying off, and in return, it will equate to water loss savings and cost savings as well. With that being said, contact information is up there on the screen, and then I'm assuming we'll turn over to some questions. So